If you had asked me a year ago if I trusted my wife, I would have laughed. Emily wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend, my partner in crime, the woman I had spent the last 7 years of my life building a future with. The idea of her betraying me wouldn't have even crossed my mind. We were the couple people envied. At parties, friends would joke about how we were. Relationship goals. Strangers often assumed we were still in the honeymoon phase, and honestly, I thought we were. Emily was beautiful, effortlessly so. She had this way of drawing people in, making them feel special. She was confident, charming, the kind of woman who could hold the room's attention without even trying. She worked in event planning, a job that fit her perfectly. She thrived in chaos, always handling last-minute crises with ease, smoothing over conflicts like they never existed. I, on the other hand, was her opposite in many ways. I worked in cybersecurity, structured, analytical, logical. My world revolved around numbers, patterns, and facts. I liked things to be predictable. Truthful. Maybe that's why this was so hard to accept. Looking back, I wonder if I was just blind. Or if I saw the signs and refused to acknowledge them. At first, the changes were subtle. Emily started working later than usual. Not just once or twice, but regularly. Just a last-minute crisis, she'd say, slipping on her heels as she rushed out the door. I didn't question it. Her job had always been unpredictable, and I admired how dedicated she was. But then came the other things. The way she started dressing differently, sexier, more daring. New lingerie that never seemed to make an appearance in our bedroom. The way she suddenly kept her phone close, tilting it away when a message came in. She was different. Distracted. Somewhere else, even when she was right next to me. One night, after she had fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet the growing unease in my chest. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. Doubt is a strange thing. Once it creeps in, it infects everything. What used to seem normal suddenly feels suspicious. Every glance, every word, every small behavior that I had once brushed off started to feel wrong. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself I was overthinking, that Emily's long hours and secretive behavior were just a side effect of stress. She had always been a busy woman, always juggling a dozen responsibilities at once. Maybe she was just exhausted. But then, there were the inconsistencies. One night she came home late, too late. I had been waiting up, pretending to watch TV, but really, I was counting the minutes. She walked through the door at nearly 1 a.m., her hair slightly messy, the scent of strong perfume clinging to her skin. "Another work emergency?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. "Yeah," she said, slipping off her heels. "Total nightmare. The caterer backed out last minute, and I had to pull some strings to find a replacement." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but my mind was already spinning. Emily had always been good at lying, she did it for a living in a way. She could smooth over situations, charm her way out of problems. But now, I was looking closer. And I could see the cracks. The next day, I decided to test her. She had mentioned meeting her coworker, Lisa, for brunch on Saturday. That morning, after she left, I casually called Lisa. "Hey, Dan!" Lisa answered cheerfully. "What's up?" "Hey, just checking in. Emily said you guys were grabbing brunch today. Everything okay?" A pause. No. I haven't talked to Emily in weeks." I felt my stomach drop. I forced a chuckle. Must have been a mix-up." "No worries, Lisa. Talk to you later." I hung up, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Emily had lied. Not a small lie. Not a misunderstanding. A full, deliberate lie. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. My mind raced, trying to come up with a reason, any reason, that made sense. Maybe she had made last-minute plans with someone else. Maybe she just wanted some alone time and didn't know how to tell me. But deep down, I knew better. Emily wasn't with Lisa. She was with someone else. I just had to find out who. After that phone call with Lisa, something inside me changed. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. I no longer trusted anything Emily said. I started watching her, closely. Not in an obvious way. I didn't want to raise suspicion. But I paid attention to the details, the little things I had once ignored. Her habits were different now. She used to leave her phone on the kitchen counter when she got home, but now, it never left her side. She used to hum while cooking, playfully dance around the kitchen, steal bites of food before it was ready. Now, she seemed distracted, her mind somewhere else. She had also started taking more care in her appearance. Not just dressing nicely, but differently. Skimpy dresses, lace bras, expensive perfume. And I never got to see any of it. One night she told me she was heading out to meet a client for a late dinner. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her get ready. She slipped into a black dress that hugged her body in a way that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't a business dress. She put on lipstick, bright red, the kind she never wore for me anymore. "Who's the client?" I asked casually. She glanced at me through the mirror. "Oh, just some new investors." I nodded slowly. "And where's the dinner?" She turned back to her reflection, adjusting her earring. "That Italian place downtown. You know, the one with the overpriced wine list?" I forced a chuckle. "Fancy." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I let her leave without another word. And then I grabbed my keys. I told myself I just needed peace of mind. That I wasn't the kind of husband who followed his wife around like some jealous idiot. But deep down, I already knew what I was about to find. I kept my distance as I followed her car. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, my heart pounding with every turn she made. Then, she took a left, away from downtown. My stomach twisted. She wasn't heading toward the Italian restaurant. She was heading toward the outskirts of town, to a quiet area with fewer streetlights, fewer people. And then, she pulled into a hotel parking lot. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I watched, frozen, as she stepped out of the car, pulled out her phone, and typed something. Seconds later, a man appeared. Tall. Well-dressed. Confident. Emily smiled at him in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. Then, he placed his hand on her lower back and led her inside. The truth hit me like a hammer. My wife wasn't just lying. She was cheating. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes had just seen. Emily. My wife. Walking into a hotel with another man. I wanted to move. To do something. To storm inside and catch them in the act, to confront her, to demand an explanation, something, anything, that could make this make sense. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of the truth. For months, I had been pushing down the gnawing feeling in my gut. Telling myself I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid. But there was no explaining this away. No innocent excuse. No misinterpretation. She was cheating. And suddenly, every strange moment over the past few months played back in my mind like a cruel highlight reel. The late nights. The perfume that wasn't hers. The way she guarded her phone. The new lingerie I never got to see. It had all been leading up to this. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the hotel entrance, watching people come and go. Every now and then, I'd glance at my phone, checking the time. An hour passed. Then 2. Still no sign of her. Eventually, I forced myself to drive home. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure: confronting her in a rage wouldn't get me the answers I wanted. No, I needed more. I needed proof. I had to be smart about this. So when Emily finally walked through the door that night, acting like nothing had happened, I played along. I pretended to be half asleep on the couch, rubbing my eyes as she set her purse down. "Hey," she said softly, as if she were trying not to wake me. Sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over. I looked at her. At the slight flush on her cheeks, the messy waves in her hair, the faint traces of lipstick that had mostly worn off. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. But I did know. And that changed everything. I forced a tired smile. It's okay. You hungry? She shook her head. No, I grabbed something while I was out. Lies. I nodded, stretching. All right. I'm heading to bed. She kissed my cheek, before heading to the bathroom to shower. I watched her disappear down the hallway, my mind already working. I needed undeniable proof. And I knew exactly how to get it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Emily and him, walking into that hotel like they had done it 100 times before. The way she smiled at him, the way he touched her lower back. It made me sick. But anger without action was useless. I needed to be smart. I needed a plan. Emily was careful, but not careful enough. She thought she was getting away with it, thought she was outsmarting me. But what she didn't realize was that I had spent my entire career detecting deception. In cybersecurity, people hid behind firewalls, encryption, fake accounts. They thought they were invisible. But no one was truly untraceable. Not even my wife. The first thing I did was clone her phone. It was surprisingly easy. While she was asleep, I took her phone from the nightstand and installed a simple tracking app that mirrored her messages and location data to my own phone. I had to move fast. Emily was a light sleeper. But after months of lying next to someone who had been betraying me, my hands were steady. When I was done, I placed her phone back exactly as it was. She would never notice. The second step? Cameras. We had security cameras around the house, but none inside. That was about to change. The next morning, while Emily was in the shower, I ordered a set of small, motion-activated cameras. They were easy to hide, one in the bedroom, another in the living room, and one in her car for good measure. The final step was patience. This was the hardest part. Emily went about her days as if nothing had changed, as if she weren't lying to my face every time she kissed me goodbye. She still told me she was working late, still smiled when I asked about her day, still slept beside me like she hadn't just been in another man's bed. But now, I had the upper hand. I watched. I waited. I tracked her movements, read her messages in real time. And slowly, the pieces started falling into place. Him. His name was Ryan. At least, that's what he went by in her phone. He wasn't some stranger. He was one of her clients. A wealthy businessman who had hired her company for an event. Their messages made me sick. They weren't just about sex. They were romantic. She told him she missed him. That she couldn't wait to see him. That she wished she could spend the whole night with him, but Dan would get suspicious. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. She had no idea how suspicious I already was. And soon, I was going to catch her. Red-handed. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. Every morning, I woke up beside Emily, knowing that she was lying to me. Every night, I kissed her goodnight, knowing she had kissed another man hours before. And yet I played my role perfectly, the loving, oblivious husband. I had to. The cameras were in place. The phone tracking was working flawlessly. I had access to her messages, her location, her calls. Now, all I needed was patience. But patience was a cruel thing when every moment felt like a lie. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, Emily's phone buzzed on the armrest beside her. I didn't even have to check my phone to know who it was. Ryan. She glanced at the screen and quickly turned the phone over, her face completely neutral. I took a sip of my beer, forcing my voice to sound casual. Who was that? She barely hesitated. Lisa. She's asking about dinner this weekend. Lies. I gave her a small smile, nodding like I believed her. Nice. We haven't seen Lisa in a while. Emily smiled back, but there was something forced about it. Yeah, it'll be fun. I wanted to call her out. I wanted to grab her phone, shove it in her face, and demand she tell me the truth. But I didn't. Because the trap was already set. That night, she told me she had another late meeting. I told her to have a good time, kissed her on the cheek, and watched her drive away. Then I opened my phone. Her location was already pinging. Not to her office. Not downtown. To the same damn hotel. I clenched my fists, my blood boiling. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was going to get proof. I grabbed my keys and followed her. When I arrived, I parked across the street and waited. Less than 5 minutes later, I saw her. Emily stepped out of her car, dressed in that same black dress I had watched her put on in our bedroom. The one she never wore for me. She checked her reflection in the window, ran a hand through her hair, and smiled down at her phone. Then he appeared. Ryan. Tall. Confident. The kind of guy who had never worried about consequences a day in his life. He walked up to her like she belonged to him. She giggled as he leaned in, whispering something in her ear. And then, he kissed her. Right there. In the open. Like my marriage was a joke. Like I was a joke. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. The camera in her car was already recording. The motion sensor had activated the moment she stepped out. I had her. Now, it was only a matter of time before she knew it. Sat in my car, watching my wife disappear into the hotel with another man. I should have been furious. I should have stormed inside, grabbed her by the wrist, and exposed her for the lying, cheating woman she had become. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, cold and detached, my heart pounding with something far worse than anger. Clarity. This was real. Undeniable. I had seen it with my own eyes. The cameras in her car had recorded their embrace. The tracking app had placed her here. The texts were all there, her excitement, her promises, her confessions of love. And the worst part? She didn't feel guilty. Not once did she hesitate. Not once did she look over her shoulder in fear of being caught. She was comfortable. She had done this before. How many times? That question burned in my mind as I finally turned the key in the ignition and drove home. I wasn't reckless enough to act on emotion. I wasn't going to let rage drive me into some messy confrontation that would make me look like the bad guy. No. Emily had already underestimated me once. I wasn't about to let it happen again. The final confirmation. When she finally came home, 3 hours later, I was already in bed, facing away from the door, pretending to be asleep. I heard her heels click softly against the floor. The rustle of fabric as she slipped out of her dress. The quiet sigh as she climbed into bed beside me. She smelled like him. A mix of expensive cologne and betrayal. I forced my body to stay still. I didn't flinch when she pressed her body against mine. I didn't react when she whispered, "I love you," into the darkness. If she truly loved me, she wouldn't be lying in our bed after spending the night with someone else. I had all the proof I needed. Tomorrow, I was going to put my plan into motion. The next morning, Emily acted like nothing had changed. She woke up early, stretched lazily beside me, and kissed my cheek before heading to the shower. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. She was comfortable in her deception. Too comfortable. I listened to the water running, my hands clenched into fists beneath the sheets. She had no idea I knew. No idea that her lies were crumbling. But soon she would. By the time she came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, I was already up, sipping my coffee at the kitchen table. I watched her move around the house, humming to herself as she prepared for another busy day. "Big plans today?" I asked casually. She smiled. "Yeah, client meetings. Might have to stay late again." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Of course. Work is important." She didn't even blink at my words. The arrogance. The ease with which she lied to me, it made my blood boil. but I smiled back at her like I always did. Because today, I wasn't just playing along. Today, I was going to make sure this was the last lie she ever told me. Laying the trap. After she left, I got to work. First, I pulled up the footage from the hidden cameras. The one in her car had captured everything. The way she smiled at Ryan, the way she smoothed her dress before meeting him, the way she kissed him without hesitation. Then I checked her phone activity. She had already texted him that morning. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Red heart." I took a screenshot and saved it. The evidence was overwhelming. I could have confronted her right then and there, but I wanted more. I wanted finality. So I took the next step. I called my lawyer. It wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about making sure she had nothing left when this was over. The final bait. That afternoon, I sent Emily a text. "Hey babe, I'm thinking of surprising you at work later. Maybe take you to dinner?" I knew what her response would be before she even sent it. "Emily, that's sweet, but I'm swamped today. Late meetings again." Rain check? Lies. I already knew exactly where she'd be. And this time, I wouldn't just be watching from a distance. Tonight, I was going to walk in on them myself. The hours crawled by as I waited for Emily to fall into my trap. She thought she was untouchable, that she was playing me for a fool. But she had no idea that tonight, everything was about to collapse around her. At exactly 7:45 p.m., her location pinged. Not at her office. Not at a client meeting. At the hotel. Again. I clenched my jaw, grabbed my keys, and headed out. But this time, I wasn't going to sit in my car like some pathetic, heartbroken husband. This time, I was going inside. When I arrived, I parked a block away. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about justice. The front desk clerk barely glanced at me as I walked past. I had already seen the room number from her texts, room 214. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my body thrumming with adrenaline. When I reached the second floor, I moved quickly, quietly. The hallway was empty. The door to 214 was closed. I could hear muffled voices inside. Laughter. Emily's laughter. The same laugh she used to have with me. Something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone, turned on the hidden camera app linked to the one I had placed in her car, and started recording. I wanted every moment of this documented. Then, without hesitation, I knocked on the door. Silence. Then a rustle. A murmur. And then, Emily's voice, cautious. "Room service?" I almost laughed at the irony. I knocked again. Harder this time. A pause. Then footsteps. The door cracked open, and I saw him. Ryan. Tall. Shirtless. Looking at me with mild confusion, like he couldn't comprehend how the husband of the woman he was screwing was standing right in front of him. "What the hell?" he muttered. Then, behind him, I saw Emily. Her face paled instantly. "Dan?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I smiled. Calm. Cold. Ready. "Hey, babe," I said, stepping inside. "Surprised to see me?" Emily stumbled backward, wrapping a blanket around herself, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Wait, listen, I can explain." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't bother," I said, tossing my phone onto the bed. "Because I have all the explanations I need." Ryan looked between us, rubbing the back of his neck, suddenly looking very uncomfortable. I turned to him, my voice level. "You should probably get dressed." He hesitated. "Look, man, I didn't know." I laughed. "Yeah, you did." Then I turned back to Emily, who was still frozen, her face drained of all color. She had no idea what was coming next. And that was the best part. The silence in the room was suffocating. Emily just stood there, gripping the blanket around herself like it could somehow shield her from reality. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Ryan, on the other hand, had enough sense to realize he was in deep shit. He grabbed his pants off the floor and quickly pulled them on, avoiding my gaze. I wasn't interested in him anymore. This was about Emily. So, I said, keeping my voice calm. How long? She swallowed hard. Dan, please, let's just. I cut her off. I said, how long? Her lip trembled. A few months. I let out a cold chuckle. A few months. Right. I grabbed my phone off the bed, scrolled to the screenshots of her messages, then turned the screen toward her. Because according to this, it's been over a year. Emily's face crumpled. Ryan, fully dressed now, shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, I didn't. I shot him a glare. I'd shut the hell up if I were you. He did. Emily took a shaky breath. Dan, I'm so. Oh, don't you dare say you're sorry. I snapped. Sorry is when you accidentally forget someone's birthday. Sorry is when you spill coffee on the couch. This is betrayal. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, can we talk about this in private? I tilted my head. Private? You mean like the way you've been sneaking around behind my back? Like the way you've been bringing him here instead of coming home to me? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. You lost the right to privacy the second you decided to cheat. Her tears finally spilled over. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations. You did. Ryan cleared his throat. I think I should. I turned to him. Yeah, you should. You should run, actually. Because if you don't get out of my sight in the next 10 seconds, I might just decide to take all this anger out on you instead. His face paled. He grabbed his jacket and was out the door in 3 seconds flat. Now, it was just me and Emily. She wiped her eyes, shaking. Dan, I know I messed up, but can we please just talk? I pulled a folded envelope from my pocket and tossed it onto the bed. She frowned, picking it up. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the papers inside. Her eyes widened. A petition for divorce. Her breath hitched. Dan! I looked at her, my face unreadable. Pack your things, Emily. My voice was quiet but firm. Final. Because when you get home tonight, the locks will already be changed. Emily stood there, clutching the divorce papers like they were a death sentence. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes darting across the room like a trapped animal. Dan, please. Don't do this. Let's talk. We can fix this. I shook my head, my expression cold. Fix what, Emily? The fact that you've been screwing another man for over a year? The fact that you've been coming home to me with his scent still on you? I scoffed. No, Emily. You broke this. And there's no fixing it. She stepped toward me, tears streaming down her face. I never stopped loving you. Don't. I cut her off, my voice sharp. Don't say that. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. For a split second, I felt something deep inside me twist, old instincts telling me to comfort her, to hold her. But I shoved them down. I had spent months drowning in pain while she had been out enjoying herself. Now, it was her turn to suffer. I turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? She choked out. I glanced back. Home. I let the word linger before adding. The place where you no longer belong. Her face crumpled. Dan, please. I held up a hand, silencing her. When you get back, your stuff will be packed and waiting outside. Don't try coming in. I've already changed the locks. Her hands shook as she gripped the papers. You don't have to do this. I exhaled, looking her dead in the eyes. Yes, Emily. I do. I left before she could say another word. By the time she got home that night, everything had already been done. Her clothes, her jewelry, her precious designer handbags, packed neatly into suitcases and left outside the front door. I had gone through the house and removed every trace of her. Pictures? Gone. Her toiletries? Boxed up. Her keys? Deactivated. And just in case she thought she could manipulate her way back in, I left a manila envelope on top of her suitcases. Inside was a copy of her text messages, the hotel receipts I had pulled from our bank statements, and printed stills from the hidden cameras. In big, bold letters, I had written on the first page, "Don't even think about contesting the divorce. If you try, I'll send this to everyone you know." When she arrived, I watched from the upstairs window as she sank to her knees, her hands trembling over the evidence of her own betrayal. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. And for the first time in months, that felt like peace. Emily stayed outside for nearly an hour, sitting on the ground next to her suitcases, her face buried in her hands. I watched from the upstairs window, expressionless, as she sobbed into the cold night air. At one point, she pulled out her phone, probably to call me. A few seconds later, my own phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't even look at the screen. I let it ring. Then ring again. And again. Eventually, she realized I wasn't going to answer. I had nothing left to say. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd changed my mind, come running down to comfort her, hold her, tell her we could work through this. Maybe she thought I'd yell, fight, beg her to stay. But I wasn't that man anymore. Emily had turned me into someone else. And that someone didn't give second chances. Eventually, she stood, wiped her face, and gathered her bags. She hesitated one last time, looking up at the house, our house. The place where we had built a life together. The place she had destroyed. Then, without another word, she walked away. I didn't watch where she went. I just turned off the lights and went to bed. The divorce was quick. She knew better than to fight it. She didn't contest a thing, not after seeing the folder of evidence I had on her. She moved in with a friend for a while. I didn't care enough to find out more. Ryan? He disappeared from her life. I wasn't sure if she left him or if he realized she wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, it wasn't my problem. For months after, Emily tried reaching out, calls, texts, even emails. They all started the same. I just want to talk. I need to explain. I made a mistake. But I never answered. Because the truth was, I didn't need explanations. I didn't need closure. Emily had already given me everything I needed the moment she walked into that hotel. It's been a year now. The house feels different without her, but not in a bad way. It's lighter, freer. Like I can finally breathe again. I started going out more. I reconnected with old friends, focused on my work, started taking better care of myself. And slowly I remembered what it felt like to be me again. The pain? It faded. The anger? It left. And Emily? She became nothing more than a bad memory. One that I had no intention of ever reliving.